Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. I'm honored today to have as my guest the United States Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Mr. Attorney General, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. It's good to be with you. You've had a good long-running show here.
Well, you're helping make it run longer, so I appreciate that. You know, I think a lot of Americans don't really know a lot about the role of the U.S. Department of Justice, which you head up. So could you just talk a little bit about that and what you see as kind of the important goals for you in your tenure as Attorney General?
Right. The Department of Justice is, we have a team in Washington, and then we have our United States attorneys. So Colorado has one United States attorney for the state, and their prosecutors are in different communities, but they work with our other agencies, which is the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and the United States Marshals, which are in every district. So I think coming from that world, I was a United States attorney for 12 years in Alabama. I kind of know that's where the work gets done. So our administration has been able to add some prosecutors, and we're putting them in the field, not in Washington, and maybe perhaps the largest increase in prosecutors that we've had maybe in decades. Certainly, I'm not sure there's ever been quite as many. We've cut budgets, and we're putting the people where we think they are needed the most.
In the field.
In the field.
So, I mean, I've had a number of U.S. attorneys on the show, including John Walsh, who was head of the U.S. Attorneys Association and worked with your predecessor and as Attorney General as well. I'd really like you to also talk a little bit about the rule of law, and that's something you don't really hear being discussed as much as I think it should be. So tell me a little bit about your perspective on that. And what we can do to improve simply people's understanding of not just the rule of law, but how valuable it is and often how unique it is compared to other countries.
Thank you for asking that. We have the greatest legal system in the world. And I know we all, and I have been known to criticize federal judges, but in all,
you're an attorney, so
well,
we
are.
We get to criticize you too.
But that's correct. And so they're not endowed from heaven by complete wisdom. Sometimes they think so. But we have, I think, the best legal system in the world, and there's no judiciary better than our federal courts. We need to protect it, however, and they need to be careful. They do not need to use the powers they are given as neutral umpires to call balls and strikes, not take sides on one side, one team or another team, as Chief Justice Roberts once testified. And I think that's exactly right. So if they start losing public confidence because the public thinks they're becoming policy advocates instead of neutral umpires, then the judiciary will be damaged. I think that's the greatest potential threat, but I believe it's a great judiciary. President Trump is appointing fabulous judges. These are highly qualified judges, smart, principled, who believe fundamentally in this concept that the oath that they take to serve under the Constitution and laws of the United States, to enforce the words of the statutes and the Constitution as they are written according to their plain meaning, and not to somehow arrogate to themselves the ability to redefine the meaning of some word to get a result that they might want to do. So I think that our legal system is fabulous. No country can match it. It can't be given to other countries. We've tried it in Iraq and Bosnia and Afghanistan, and I've been there and tried to work with them. But it's just hard if it's not part of your culture.
Well, you've also been there as a U.S. Senator as well.
Yes, that's what I mean.
So I'd be interested, though, certainly a number of Americans do feel that there are judges, and maybe too many, that make decisions that are political or that are an overreach on a topic. And that seems to undermine a lot of Americans' confidence in the judicial system. How do we address that? And because judges don't necessarily, when someone's appointed a judge, he or she doesn't necessarily go through maybe as much training as really should be required. Is there anything we can do to address that issue?
Well, there is a philosophy afoot in America, and it's been out there for 40 plus years, that good judges advance the law. And they're not bound by previous rules or the traditional interpretations, that they can just change it. So this is a deep philosophical difference. And so President Trump and President Reagan and Bush's appointed judges who are more traditional, saw themselves as less activist, and other presidents have appointed judges who seek to advance the law, which really means advance their political agenda, in my opinion, too often. So I think it is a danger. We've got there's 600 district federal judges in America. We have a number of cases that have gone to one of those judges, and he's issued an injunction that applied nationwide. For example, we had a judge in Hawaii that bound the entire United States to his one decision. And we basically are winning a lot of those cases on appeal. We're going to challenge this whole philosophy that a single judge in a single district can somehow bind the entire country when parties aren't before them. And we've had a couple of Supreme Court justices express concern about these injunctions. I think that causes public to lose confidence.
Well, we've had Sandra Day O'Connor on the show 4 times, and Justice Breyer, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I think they would all agree that nationwide decisions should reside with the U.S. Supreme Court, not with one district court. But what about the number of laws? And because you've been a prosecutor, I mean, one of my concerns is that we have so many laws in this country that the average citizen doesn't even know 1% of them. So how do we function in a society where we have so many laws? We're adding laws, thousands of laws, if you look at it on a nationwide basis every year. How can a citizen even know what his or her responsibilities are?
I think you asked an important question. Yes, these laws have gotten too complicated, and they're not readily able to be remembered or even called to the attention of an American citizen. They may not have any idea there's a law in the books that says you can't do this or that, and they find themselves being sued or locked up over an action that they may not have even known violated an environmental regulation or some other kind of regulation. So I do think that we've gotten too complicated. In addition to that, you have thousands of pages of regulations that expand from the law, and they are real detailed. Lawyers fight over all the words, but the average person doesn't know what's in these regulations.
Right. I think that would be a great project for the federal government to undertake. I mean, I'd be happy to see the issuance of laws be frozen. I'm not expecting a reduction in laws. But you mentioned incarceration.
But I just mentioned that.
Sure.
We've issued a number of regulations in the Department of Justice since I became Attorney General. One, for example, says you can't issue a letter. Some government agency issues a letter and actually could result in changing of the law, so you go to jail. And we say you can't be prosecuted for these letters, and that you're only bound by the law that's passed by Congress or a properly authenticated regulation. So you're right. We even got to the point where agencies could issue just a letter and bind people.
All right, well, that's a good start.
Okay.
So congratulations on that.
We've reduced regulations too under the President's leadership, more than regulations have ever been reduced. I think some of them may have even been good 20 years ago, but now totally irrelevant to a modern communication world. And so we made a lot of progress.
I think that unfortunately is happening a lot, where you have laws on the books that don't make any sense today.
There's more of the Aaron Harber Show after this.
You can't arrest a hardcore gang member and have them get 6 months in jail and they're back on the street. You can't have murderers getting light sentences. It just will not work.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howe Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
You mentioned incarceration. Huge issue in the country from a budgetary perspective, from a social cost perspective. We incarcerate almost 2.25 million people at any one time, or they're in the system, as it were. What are the challenges that presents? How do we reduce those numbers? How do we save the federal government, and especially states, the millions and millions of dollars we spend on incarceration? What can we do to get a number of those people out of prison but keep the country safe?
Well, we're doing a lot now. I think most states are showing some decline in their prison population. The federal government, we focus on serious gangs, violence, international drug cartels, fraudsters. We have a number of prosecutions on leakers. We got those kind of serious cases that are in federal court, not the small petty larceny or small drug use cases. So we're working hard at that. The federal prison population in the last 5 years or so has dropped from 220 some odd thousand to 183,000. The average sentence is down in federal court by 19%. Many states have also reduced their population to save money. But I got to tell you, Aaron, I was an assistant United States attorney many years ago, many decades ago. I've watched the crime rate, and you've got to be careful. You have to have a sufficient punishment. You can't arrest a hardcore gang member and have them get 6 months in jail and they're back on the street. You can't have murderers getting light sentences. It just will not work. And in the 70s, when I started out to be a prosecutor, assistant United States attorney, crime had been increasing for 2 decades, and American federal and state increased punishment at mandatory sentences, and we began to turn the crime rate down. But we did have, in 2015, against all these declining trends, in which murder rate dropped by half in those years, half from 1980. And so we're seeing that if we aren't tough enough and if we aren't targeted enough, then you could have these crime rates increase again. In 2015, homicides went up 12%. In 2016, they went up another 8% after 30 years of decline. So we've got some good plans. What the U.S. attorneys are going to do here, Bob Troyer and others all over the country, we're giving them a certain degree of freedom, but we're saying you use your resources with state and local sheriffs and police chiefs. You decide who the most dangerous criminals are, and we believe science shows that if you target the alpha criminal resolutely, regularly, over a period of years, take them off the streets, you will see a decline in violence. New York has proven it as far as I'm concerned.
You
I've
mentioned
been there. So I think this is what our Project Safe Neighborhood plan is, and we believe it's going to help reduce crime.
You mentioned gangs. I'm stunned. I don't think a lot of Americans are familiar with MS-13. I know you've had major initiatives directed towards that gang, but the idea that they have something like 10,000 members throughout the country in 40 states. How did that happen? And how in our country, why do we have such an extraordinary problem with gangs?
It is far more than we should have. I think there was in this last few years this idea that we've incarcerated too many people. We pull back on prosecutions of these are what you call outlaws. They seek to establish their sovereignty, really, their control. Their motto is rape, murder, something in control. They extort businesses in the areas they control. And they're very violent, the most violent gang of all, MS-13 is. And so we are targeting them. They challenge directly the authority of the United States of America. They directly assert control over their neighborhoods, and we're not going to allow it to happen. We will not allow it. Now, a number of years ago, prosecutions were hard on them. I'd say 7 or 8 years ago. Then the numbers dropped, but they went on to different things and set different priorities, and the federal prosecutors did, and they've re-strengthened again. So if you have to stay on them, you have to target these. Many of them have committed multiple murders. You might remember the parents of the two 16-year-old girls from Islip, New York, that were at the State of the Union when President Trump spoke. He had met them previously. I met them in Islip, New York. Two 16-year-old girls. They disrespected, apparently, the MS-13. They were killed with baseball bats and machetes. One had just had their 16th birthday. The other one was waiting their 16th birthday. And this is and they said to me, the mother told me, there's a wing on our school in Islip, New York, they call the MS-13 wing. Even the teachers are afraid of them. And we cannot allow that to happen. We are not going to allow it to happen.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Because I've never done endorsements or commercials, people ask how are our programs funded, especially because we provide them as a public service to all our broadcast outlets. It's expensive to produce our show, whether we do them here in Denver or go to places such as Aspen, Washington, D.C., or even Iraq. The answer is we depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to help allow us to continue to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, just go to dmefd.org. The DMEF is a tax-exempt public charitable organization and has promised to dedicate 100% of every contribution to support our public affairs initiatives. If you believe, as I do, in the need for a forum which promotes civil discourse and mutually respectful discussion, I hope you'll decide to make a contribution today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbortv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Let's jump to, we're talking about crime, gun violence. I mean, obviously the country is completely very concerned with the amount of gun violence in our country. When we compare the statistics of what is going on with gun violence in America compared to any other major industrialized nation, our rates are just extraordinary. What can we do to reduce gun violence in this country?
No doubt about what we need to do. The number one thing that works best is to attack and prosecute the criminals with guns. Bob Troyer, our United States Attorney here, he's got a plan that's he shared with me last night. It's consistent with what other U.S. attorneys are doing, but he has a very detailed plan that he's worked out with state and local people, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. We identify the most dangerous criminals, the ones who are carrying guns, and we build cases on them. And if you do that regularly and consistently, you can bring down this violence. We believe, he believes, I think most law enforcement believes, a significant part of the increase in homicide in America in the last few years is going down this year. We're going to bring it down.
All right.
But it's been going up. And
I'm going to hold you to that.
You hold me to it. We want to bring down violent crime. Our goals are explicit. We want to bring down violent crime. We've had 2 years overall increases in violent crime. We want to bring down this homicide rate, which is the highest we've seen in decades. And we want to bring down the opioid deaths. We want to bring down the number of opioid drugs that are being prescribed. We've convicted and indicted 150 doctors since 2017. 16 of those doctors prescribed 20 million pills illegally. This is causing deaths from drug overdoses, the likes of which we've never, ever seen in this country.
What is their response? What is the rationale when they get interviewed initially for such an extraordinary volume of prescriptions? What feedback do you get, or does the department get? What do these people say in their defense?
Well, some of them just started making easy money. The addicts come in and they write a prescription for these pills that sell for $80 on the streets. They go out with 60 of these pills. They pay them cash fees. And there are doctor clinics in this country with lines around the block. And all they want to do is come in. They have virtually no physical taken, and the doctor writes that prescription, gets his cash money. One of the physicians was rated at $1 million in cash in his house. They have expensive automobiles, boats. They just transitioned from a physician to an illegal drug person, some of them. And then some others are just sliding in that direction. It's so tempting, I guess.
What about the pharmaceutical companies?
Yes, we are looking at them. We're going to continue. We believe that there can be liability there. We're not pulling back one bit from that. We're going after them. We're going after the doctors, the pharmacists, and President Trump declared this opioid crisis a national health crisis, and we intend to bring down, and he set a goal of a 30% reduction in the total amount of narcotics being prescribed by doctors.
Now, can you achieve this? Because one of the things in his announcement, I think his announcement was well received, but there weren't dollars behind it, extra dollars behind it. Do you think you can achieve those goals without extra resources?
Oh, well, I think we're close to having the resources we need. The Drug Enforcement Administration has some administrative powers they can use, and we've unleashed them. We tell them, let's look at this. They can pull a license of a pharmacist or a doctor who's acting improperly. We're moving our prosecutions up. We've named a opioid coordinator in each one of our 94 United States Attorney's offices.
Has that been announced publicly already?
Yes,
Okay.
I did
wasn't aware of that
some time ago. Prosecutions, I mentioned the doctors, that's way up. So these are big. And if we stay on this path, well, we've already seen, we probably will see a double-digit reduction in prescriptions this year. There was a smaller reduction last year. We think next year will be an even bigger year. And I think we can meet the president's goal. I just think, you know, Aaron, we prescribe more opioids than any country in the world by many times. We're way up there. And people need pain pills. We're not trying to stop that. But if we had reduction of 30%, and you had doctors prescribing less amounts, initially, and have a patient come back if they need more. And that's happening in the country. Insurance is saying 7 days is all they'll pay for in the first script.
First round, right.
And so that'll help.
Do you think it's driving people at all to the street, to illegal drugs, to
Well,
heroin and fentanyl?
For a number of people, they started out with prescription drugs, and it inevitably gets where you can't get enough, and they do go to heroin and fentanyl particularly, and those are death-dealing drugs. That's where the deaths are surging. Fentanyl is so much a killer drug. Heroin too, and sometimes often they're mixed, heroin and fentanyl. So that's how we hit 65,000 deaths last year.
Just extraordinary. All right, I know we're running out of time. A couple issues that I know you want to talk about. One, of course, in Colorado, everybody pays attention to what your thoughts are on marijuana. And I know you must have had that discussion with Bob Troyer. Kind of tell me your take, given that now, roughly 37 states have legalized it in some form, and the nation seems to be moving in that direction. What's your perspective on that?
Well, first, I think we should never communicate, no matter what we do, whether we make it legal or illegal, we should never communicate that just because you can extract something out of marijuana, perhaps, that is has medicinal value, in general, just smoking of marijuana is not a healthy thing. Particularly, there is no doubt it's very damaging to young people, and their brains can be permanently damaged. So first of all, nobody should be joking around that marijuana is a healthy thing, in my opinion. So it remains against federal law. I see Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Gardner did have a recent press conference to say they want to offer legislation that requires the federal government to follow state law, which I think recognizes that that's not the law now. The law now is that no matter what a state does, it still remains against the federal law. And we have a responsibility to do our job in a correct way. And I don't feel like I'm empowered to just give immunity, blanket immunity to people who violate the federal law.
All right, we're out of time. We didn't get to talk about illegal immigration. Let's do that next time. That's a big topic, I know, on your mind as well. One last question I did want to ask you about, that so that people understand, is the fact that, in your job, you're really in an independent position. Just give me one or two sentences so people understand the independence of the Department of Justice.
Well, I spent 15 years in the department. I love this department. I had great respect for the traditions of this department. So yes, we seek to be the lawyer for the government of the United States. We seek to help the president, whoever the president is, to achieve his goals in a lawful and effective way. And we have to maintain fairness and objectivity regardless of politics. You just can't do this. It's not a political thing to use the laws of the country one way or the other to advance a political agenda. So we stay busy. It's a great department. We got great lawyers, and really our strength, I think, is right here in Colorado. And I just came from Montana, and you meet those local police chiefs and sheriffs, and then you meet your federal investigative agents and our U.S. attorneys, and that partnership, I believe, will help us reduce crime, reduce homicide, reduce overdose drug deaths, and that's our goal.
All right. Mr. Attorney General, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. That's the end of our special program with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.